And we are live on the New York Mets post-game show. It is March 13th, 2025, and we just watched the New York Mets take on the Boston Red Sox in yet another spring training game. The Boston Red Sox did defeat the New York Mets by a score of 3-2, but the scores are irrelevant at this point as we have another injury update that we will be talking about in addition to our game recap and analysis. What's up, Rob? How you doing?
Doing all right. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody could watch the game, unfortunately, because, MLB still likes to play games with TV rights and all that nonsense. But it was nice to see some news today and not so good news in total, but we'll get into it for sure. What's up,
Yeah,
everybody?
we take it in strides. I mean, there's good news, and then when there's good news, there's always bad news around the corner. So we'll definitely talk about everything related to the New York Mets in terms of the latest updates, but also the game that we saw today. Again, March 13th, 2025, coming at you live at around 3:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I appreciate everybody that's in the chat that is watching this live or will watch the replay of this, please do smash those thumbs up buttons and subscribe to both of our channels, as all of these post games and eventually live pre-game shows that we'll be doing in the regular season will be streamed to both of our channels. Salute to Steven, Brad, Aaron, Daniel, and the other Daniel as well. Both Daniels in the chat right now. Appreciate you all being here as well. Jose, shout out to you. And we'll definitely talk about Beatty and Luis Angel Acuna here in this show. But again, we did have a game that we witnessed unfold. Well, we didn't witness because again, MLB is really weird about these, no broadcast type of games, which has been going on for the past couple of games. So we would have liked to witness it, but we'll thank MLB for that one. But again, please drop those comments in the live chat as well and just subscribe and hit the thumbs up. It helps out the channels in a major way. Okay, starting off with the offense that we saw from today, it was a little bit lackluster up until about that eighth inning when the Mets scratched 2 runs off the board. But you can see a lot of regulars here that will be in the Mets opening day lineup, especially in that top five. And most notably, Brandon Nimmo getting the duties at DH today, I believe in his second spring training game, Rob. What do you make of the box score? I mean, clearly it just was a lack of offense across the board. You see a lot of offers, a lot of one for threes with a strikeout. And Alexander Canario as well, going over through 2 strikeouts. I think he's had a really rough time getting going ever since coming into this Mets organization. We have had nothing, offensively at least to talk about with him. But what do you make of this lineup? What do you make of the production? But also Brandon Nimmo DHing. This is a topic we've talked about for the past couple of weeks, and me going back to at least, the last month. This could be the outlook in terms of what we see on opening day with Jesse Winker in left field yet again. I believe back-to-back days in spring training, and Brandon Nimmo getting the DH duties. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see Nimmo in the lineup. The Mets want that bat in the lineup for Brandon Nimmo, so they're going to put him at DH. We were talking about it yesterday on the post game, having different ideas of how they're going to use Brandon Nimmo if he's on the opening day roster, and seeing him in the game is key number one, right? That's a good sign as it is, because as far as we can get Nimmo to stay healthy, is probably as a DH for at least a little while. And look, Winker is serviceable in left field. He's not great. He's not going to wow you, but he's going to go 100 miles an hour. He's going to give it his all, and he's going to be an adequate left fielder. He's going to be in the lineup anyway, Winker, if he was the DH. So you might as well just put him in the lineup. I think they are going to platoon left field as long as Nimmo is not in left field. Some days it might be Tyrone Taylor or Jesse Winker, depending on probably matchups. I know we don't like matchups, and it seems like we're already working on matchup situations. I would love to see if tomorrow, if they're playing, there's a lefty on the mound, because then we'll really see if the left fielder would be Tyrone Taylor. I mean, that would answer a lot of questions that we have. But Brett Beatty, again, I know we're going to get to him defensively, but he gets another hit today. And I don't care how bad you might be defensively or how inexperienced you are in a position. If you hit, they'll find a spot for you on the field. It's just that simple.
100%, and we'll definitely talk about Brett Beatty defensively here in just a second as he does get the start in at second base, because this is sort of a discussion that we're going to be having here moving forward with the unfortunate news that dropped about Jeff McNeil. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, Brett Beatty's bat at this point has been undeniable. He's hitting like 379, something like that. We'll talk about that here in just a second, as well as I have his actual spring training numbers up on the screen. But listen, I don't know exactly what's going to happen between the DH spot and left field, but it's going to be matchups based again, like you said. And I do apologize. My puppy is going crazy here. So, Rob, just take it away for 1 second, please.
No problem. Yeah. So look, when it comes to Brett Beatty, look, the possibility of him being in this lineup now that McNeil is going to be out and not available on the opening day roster, Brett Beatty, because he is hitting, because the potential of his bat, we already know how it is. If you hit, they'll find a spot for you, right? When you're a good hitter, they'll find a spot for you. You might not be the best defensive player. We how many times have we talked about Juan Soto not being a great defensive player? Why is teams going after him? Why do people think he's a generational talent? Because of his bat. I'm not saying Brett Beatty's going to be Juan Soto or even better than we actually think, but because of the potential of his bat, they will deal with the lack of defense at second base, at least for the time being. Like, you can't be, terrible. Right. But you do have a great shortstop in Francisco Lindor that can probably rein him in a little bit and do what he needs to do. Brett Beatty just got to make the easy plays. Look, it was only one play today that was hit hard. He tried to get in front of it when he could have just backhanded. And again, playing third base and playing second base are two different ball games. I know this from very much experience playing in high school and college. Played third base in high school, played second base in college. Huge difference, right? At third base, you try to get in front of almost every ball, right? You try to square up the ball, and that's how you play third base. At second base, you might have to go to the back end a little bit more. Brett Beatty's mindset as a third baseman, probably most of his life, he was trying to get in front of the ball. That was the problem that he had with the one that came up on him and hit him in like his hip area. The other one was up the middle, right? He did the backhand, he caught the ball, he just didn't get the guy out. So it was only one play that I see the logic of what he was thinking, but he has to get that third base mentality out of his mind, because if he would have backhand that ball, he would have just made a crow hop and thrown it to first base and would have been fine. So I think Brett Beatty's going to be okay. He doesn't have technically the body type for a second baseman, but you could still be adequate if you know what you're doing, right? If he practices hard enough, he'll get there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's like, do the Mets want to maximize the offensive capabilities in the bottom of the order now that McNeil and Alvarez are out? And we'll see the updated part 2 version of the 26-man roster, because I know we talked about that yesterday. But, do they want to maximize the offense down in the bottom of the order to try to make the lineup as flexible as possible? Or do they want to prioritize that defense, which if they want to prioritize the defense, you're going to go with Luis Angel Acuna all day long, right? The natural second baseman at that point, or at least middle infielder. But yeah, we really haven't seen too many plays with Brett Beatty out there to know enough of what the Mets are working with. I mean, 2 pretty tough plays. The one that he dove and caught it, I mean, there was no chance that he was going to throw the runner out. And even the hard hit, I agree with you 100%. That should be a backhand, probably throwing off of, not setting your feet, not having enough time, because I think the runner was Vaughn Grissom at that point. So there's no way that he was probably going to catch him anyways. But yeah, I don't think that we've seen enough. And I think that with the reps that he's been taking in the videos that I've seen, the footwork looks sound. But I agree, the body type isn't that of a typical second baseman. So we'll see how he adjusts, especially in the regular season, if he's getting reps there on an everyday basis. In-game live action is a lot different. So, we will see exactly what he has 100%. And again, we'll talk about all that. But, moving down in the bottom of this graphic here in the lineup, Jose Siri takes the 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. That's exactly the kind of game that you're going to see once in a while from Jose Siri, right? He'll hit you home runs. And then on the other occasion, there's going to be a lot of strikeouts mixed in between with his strikeout rate in his career that we know, right? We knew that when the trade happened, and we both talked about that on our channels. Alexander Canario, I mean, he could have been an option at left field in any circumstance that Nimmo wasn't available. I think he's really hitting his way out of that role at this point. Maybe could find himself a home in AAA as that outfield type of depth. But I don't think that there's any way, no matter how it shakes out in left field or at the DH spot, that Alexander Canario is going to be on the open day roster. And also the backup catcher, Hayden Sanger, takes the 0 for 2. And I believe Chris Williams, who's another internal option, we're talking about internal options for the backup catching duties for the New York Mets. Sanger got the start, and Chris Williams did relieve him later on in the ball game. So really, again, with the Mets not scoring many runs this spring training at all, let alone the first couple of innings when the mainstay guys are there and they're waiting to get the bulk of their runs in the later innings, kind of when we've tuned out or just are not watching altogether with the lack of streams here on the MLB app. Do you have anything else with this lineup before we move on to the pitching side of things?
There's been a decent amount of talk about Francisco Lindor having not a very good spring at all. I think he has like 2 hits, maybe 3. He hasn't looked good, but again, I'm not worried about Francisco Lindor. He's a slow starter. He never does well in spring training. There's pretty good chance that he probably won't start the season very well. He's just a slow starter. I know that's a big topic of conversation amongst Met fans, but I think he'll be okay. It's just, he's probably trying to stay healthy. Number one, he don't want to do too much or try too hard, to be quite honest with you, to get hurt, because he's got to worry about that back a little bit. But good news is, still good. A good sign from Brandon Nimmo, like we said. Pete Alonso with another hit. You see Winker in left field. So everything that we needed to see, I think we saw today, good or bad. And, it's not much to talk about the offense, but runs don't really matter at this point, and scores. So as long as people stay healthy, I'm okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, but they are going to matter soon in just
Yeah.
about 2 weeks exactly. And we'll see how the lineup shakes out come opening day when Carlos Mendoza decides based off of what David Stearns gives him to work with. But here was the pitching line from today versus the Boston Red Sox. David Peterson got the start, went 3 2/3 innings pitched, 2 runs allowed, one of which was an earned run, I believe, on the very first pitch of the game, which was a solo home run. And then the other unearned run was that boot by Brett Beatty that allowed Vaughn Grissom to reach first base. And then David Peterson gives up the double to score Vaughn Grissom. 2 walks mixed in between. He didn't have his best stuff from the looks of it, given the 2 walks and only 1 strikeout. Usually you'll have a little bit of a higher total of strikeouts for David Peterson, who works with a good mix of pitches. But it's good to see him out there in any event, because the Mets are really going to need him given the rotation outlook for him to step up. And many people, including myself, can really see him probably step up as maybe the ace at some point of this rotation if he picks up the way that he did and he left off in 2024. And really, I think the tandem of those first 3, when everybody's healthy in the rotation, Manaea, Senga, Peterson, and you can even probably lump in, Clay Holmes in that category. With what we've seen in spring training so far, it's good signs, but we just need everybody healthy, and that's the most important thing. And then rounding things out for the rest of the ball game, Edwin Diaz, Ryan Stanek, Genesis Cabrera, and Huascar Brazaban. Edwin Diaz posting a scoreless inning. So does Ryan Stanek and Genesis Cabrera. Good to see them post scoreless innings. And I think that a lot of Mets fans, right, there's this tendency to jump to conclusions with some of these guys that are going to show up for you in the clutch. Francisco Lindor, like you just said, from the offensive side of things, people are already panicking and worrying at this point on March 13th of 2025, 2 weeks before the regular season. And the same thing with Edwin Diaz, right? And it's a little bit of a different discussion with Edwin Diaz, obviously, given the injury 2 seasons ago and how he's going to really bounce back now that he has a full season under his belt in 2024. But I don't worry about Edwin Diaz when I look at his bullpen. I don't worry about Edwin Diaz whatsoever. So I was curious to see what your take was on some of these bullpen guys that we saw today, especially Edwin Diaz and Ryan Stanek.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Edwin Diaz. He's one of those guys that, can be erratic. If he doesn't throw his fastball for strikes, he's going to, heavily throw his slider and use his slider more often, which gets him in trouble. He works off his fastball, and he's gonna have his walks. He's probably gonna give up a hit or two, but I think he will get out of a lot of jams. He's gonna, make us crazy and probably make us bite our nails. But we're Mets fans, guys. We're used to closers making us go crazy and giving us heart attacks, right? I don't have to name all the closers that we had that gave us heart attacks. It's just the life Met fans live. I know we don't want to live like that anymore, but Edwin Diaz is that guy. He needs to keep that fastball in the strike zone or around the strike zone. He can't get wild with it. He can't go away from the fastball when he doesn't have it, because when he gets away from his fastball, his slider is good, but when the hitter knows that slider is coming, it's something that the hitters will hit or take. He's got to use that fastball. He can't be afraid to throw his fastball if it's not working. And that's the only way, I think, the only issue that I think Diaz has. And hopefully, I don't think we're going to see 2022 Diaz again, to be quite honest with you. I don't think we need 20. We would all love 2022 Edwin Diaz, but give me something close to 2022, right? Because I think he struck out half his batters in 2022 that he faced. That's nice and that's great. We all would take that, but give me a solid closer. Give me somebody that can do the job. Yeah, you're going to have your hiccups every now and then, but I'm not too worried about Edwin Diaz. I do worry about when he loses his fastball, how can he get out of an inning? And that's what you always worry about. How can he still save the game? When it comes to Stanek's a bulldog. I think he's going to be fine. He's a guy that can pitch the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. We all know we can do that. Stanek's just a badass. I'm not worried about him. Brazaban is an interesting guy that we've seen today. He didn't look good today. A couple of strikeouts, gave up a run. Didn't look too well. A couple of walks, which has always been his problem. But he has an electric arm. That's something that's always enticing to teams. It's not just the Mets. The Mets did get him at the deadline last year, thinking he'd be a part of this bullpen. Last year, late in the season, he was okay and wasn't really, I don't even think he was on the postseason roster, maybe in the division series, but wasn't really used. And, he's the guy that I think is a fringe guy for the bullpen. Genesis Cabrera, we talked about. If AJ Minter's healthy, he's probably going to be the lone lefty in the bullpen. But again, there might be another option there where they might bring two lefties, and I think Genesis Cabrera over Danny Young is a better possibility. But Danny Young seems to be liked by the organization, liked by David Stern, so we'll see. We have to wait and see, with a lot of these guys, because there's still a couple of bullpen options that we can still talk about that can make the roster. Yeah, and Chris, I agree with you. I'm not worried about Edwin Diaz. I do worry when he loses his fastball. He goes to his slider way too much, and it's kind of predictable, and the hitters know what's coming. That was his problem last year, and that's always been his problem when he's been a Met. Even in 2022, even though he was excellent, there was a couple of times when he didn't have that fastball and he wasn't throwing it around the strike zone or for strikes. He relied on his slider too much, and all he needs to do is hang one pitch, and it's over the wall. So I'm not too worried about Edwin Diaz. I'm not even worried about Peterson, who had a bad day, which every pitcher does. He was going to have one of these games. You seen a lineup that had a couple of much better hitters and a couple of starters. So, again, when you get closer and closer to opening day, you're going to see real major league lineups. Then we can start seeing and start talking about the numbers and the stat line for the pitchers that face a major league lineup when we get closer to opening day. And look, he faced a couple of guys. He faced Devers. He faced Cassis. A couple of guys that are mainstays in the Red Sox lineup. He got a little bit beat up today, right? This was probably a situation. If this was a regular season game, he probably would have been out of the game around the same time he was today, and you would have had to use a lot of your bullpen. So, it goes to show you that spring training numbers really don't matter until they really get into the middle of March. And then we'll really see, how does Clay Holmes do and David Peterson. But with Peterson, I'm not worried about him. I think he's going to be really fine. It's just one of those days where it's like, oh, you got to see real hitters today. Let's see how you perform.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. This is kind of a weird game in general. And for the third time of us stating this, is that we didn't actually get to watch the damn game, which is a little bit harder because when I assess, like I'd like to just not be, stat cast or box score watching the whole entire time. I want to see exactly, the progression of pitches and how these pitches look. Even if he gets beat up, who cares? So what? It's spring training. But is he, does he have his best stuff that day, or is he working with something less? And that's something that we just couldn't see with our own eyes today. But again, David Peterson, 3 2/3 innings pitched, 2 runs allowed. One of them is going to be an unearned run, but again, he did give up the double to give up that second run, and then also 2 walks. The walks really is the major thing when we talk about a guy like Tyler McGill making an impact for this rotation potentially, and also David Peterson continuing where he left off. At one point, we were talking about David Peterson being one and the same to Tyler McGill. The stuff has been there, right? And we know that about both guys, but the efficiency. And that's where David Peterson has separated himself from a guy like Tyler McGill. The efficiency was there in 2024. And guess what? Wouldn't you know it? The success in terms of the overall numbers thereafter followed. And Tyler McGill actually, in his latest quote, said that the one thing that's been holding him back in his career is that consistency. Who would have thunk it, Mr. Tyler McGill? We all are telling you this. Please just find the consistency. And honestly, at that point, I can see him being a nice little back end of the rotation piece in a 4 or 5. But if you're not going to be efficient, if you're going to leave the ball game after 4 4 1/3, 4 2/3, it's not really doing the Mets any good at this point. So we've seen that time and time again. David Peterson, we need to ascend the ladder and not go back down to where he once was, because 2024 was an impressive showing. Edwin Diaz, I already said I'm not worried about. Ryan Stanek, again, not worried about. He's a veteran, has World Series experience, has played on some awesome teams, back there in Houston. So he should be a really good addition or re-addition to his bullpen, because he didn't have his best of showings in the second half of the season when the Mets got him, but he really came alive down the stretch and especially in the playoffs. And I think that he's going to be a nice utility reliever at this point. We can say that he is, because he can appear in the 7th inning. He can be a setup guy. Oh, and he can also close ball games if you really need him to. So I think that's where the asset, lies in Ryan Stanek. Genesis Cabrera, we've already talked about. He struggles with the strike zone at times. He has electric stuff, 97, 98 sometimes on his fastball, but he's definitely, as a non-roster invitee, going to be starting off in AAA. That's a given, especially when you have AJ Minter, especially when you have a guy like Danny Young, who, if the Mets opt to go for 2 lefties, Danny Young not having any options associated with his contract is probably going to get that first chance. And Huascar Brazaban. Listen, a lot of people are skeptical about Huascar Brazaban, and I understand why, but I will say I was such a major fan of that trade when it went down, bringing him from the Marlins to Queens, because when I look at, like, this is a stuff guy. He's a stuff type of guy. And I guess you can say that it falls in line if you want to compare him to some of the starters in the old version of David Peterson, hopefully the old version of David Peterson, and also Tyler McGill, guys that possess the stuff and the stat cast, the advanced analytics type of, movement, etc., that you want to see, but sometimes are just missing the zone consistently enough to just put batters on via the walk, and that's what hurts them. If Huascar Brazaban can understand and get just a little bit of a feeling for the strike zone with what he has in terms of the electricity on his fastball and also some of the movement on his off speed, I think that he's going to come up in 2025 at a certain point, because we know 162 game season is grueling. The bullpen, there's a high turnover rate, and the 2024 Mets were key examples of that high turnover rate. Huascar Brazaban is going to be in Queens at some point, and I really do hope that he does not relinquish that opportunity and that roster spot when he is given that opportunity at some point in 2025. So I'm foreshadowing a little bit with Huascar Brazaban, but I will say I know a lot of Mets fans are not on board on the Brazaban train, but I am, Rob. I absolutely am, and I have been, even in some of the tougher times in the second half of his Mets tenure last season.
Yeah. You got killed last year for Brazavan when we
I
got him.
did.
Again, he has an electric arm. He has issues with control, We all knew that. That was obviously the take from him. We were hoping maybe the lab will make him a little bit better. He still has issues with control. I don't think he has any idea where the pitches are going. I think that, again, Stearns brought him in, so he's going to give him a chance, in my opinion. I think you're going to see him. And you know what? If he finds it, he's a great addition to the bullpen. Will he find it? That's yet to be determined. But again, I think the guys that Stearns brought in via trade, via free agency, those are his guys. He will give them chances, just like he gave Adrian Hauser a chance when he traded for him, right? But when they didn't do their job, he got rid of them. And I think if Brazaban doesn't do his job, he'll be gone. And it's just that simple. So, and with the depth pieces that we have in the bullpen that might be in the minors, they'll get an opportunity. So I'm not too worried about it at all.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people forget that Brazaban's got two options on his contract. So, even if he doesn't perform, he's not going to get DFA'd. All they have to do is just keep him around in the minor leagues as depth, and they'll be fine. I mean, we're not talking about a guy that has no options. We're not talking about a guy that doesn't have one option. It's two options. So the ball game changes there, and he's going to be a Met for the foreseeable future. Whether he succeeds or not, it's yet to be determined at the major league level. All right. That's the pitching side of things. About 27 minutes into the stream here. Now let's talk about probably what everybody wants to talk about and the news that dropped this morning. And I released a video on my channel talking about this, a little bit of a teaser because I knew that we were going to talk about this in the post game. But this is Jeff McNeil in a situation, right? Jeff McNeil, the guy that a lot of Mets fans are still holding out hope for in terms of returning to his batting title, self in 2022, maybe even a 2019 version if we're lucky. He goes down with an oblique injury. It's a low grade right oblique strain is what they're calling it. And this is a quote from Jeff McNeil himself earlier this morning from SNY TV over on X, quote unquote, the next step right now is to get symptom free. We're not sure how long that could take. I barely have any symptoms right now. And that's Jeff McNeil talking about the timeline of his own oblique strain. This has been an ongoing saga of the second base situation because we came into spring training already assuming that there was going to be some level of competition given the lack of success that McNeil has had basically over the past season and a half, maybe even 2 seasons. I wanted everything to go perfectly for Jeff McNeil. I wanted him to prove me wrong. And he still can, right? He's going to come back. I mean, this is going to be a month injury, month and a half. We hope, according to what we're hearing, we hope. This is a nagging injury, ladies and gentlemen. This is an oblique. So he's going to be back. And I have no doubt in my mind, regardless of what the Mets do in the tandem of Acuna and Beatty, because I can really, and we'll talk about that here in the next slide as well, in terms of maybe a potential platoon at second base that they'll deploy with the matchups. But I think that when McNeil comes back, he's still going to have that job. Like that's going to be his job. I believe that. I'm not sure if you do, Rob. Maybe one of the younger guys can play themselves into that full-time position to kind of force Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns' hand. But I think that unless that's the case, McNeil's going to be the second baseman when he comes back. It's going to be difficult because we haven't really seen the best of Jeff McNeil early in spring training either. I mean, new stance, a little bit of a newer approach, right? In terms of trying to go more gap to gap. I mean, we've had this conversation on the post games here over the past week and a half consistently. Where are you at with this Jeff McNeil injury? And before we talk about the candidates who will be replacing him come opening day and filling out those roster spots, just take me through a little bit about like what your reaction was when this injury news first hit the timeline.
I mean, these guys are like paper. Like, it's crazy. I mean, these obliques, like, this needs to be studied like Tommy John. Like, it's that crazy. Like, oblique here, oblique there, low grade, high grade, mid grade. Like, it's crazy to me. But when it comes to Jeff McNeil in general, I don't know. I don't think he's that good of a player anymore. You know, you keep on changing your stance, your approach. And it's been 2 years now that you changed your stance, your approach, and you change it again. And we expect a miracle here. And I don't think that's going to work. And again, when you try to change your stance, try to change the way you hit probably his entire career in the minors, in college, what happens? Your body has to adjust. And I think this is a clear example that, these obliques are very fragile to these players, it seems. And I think, honestly, I think the change of approach, him being a slap hitter type of a guy that, was more of a gap to gap hitter, he's not a guy that drives the ball. He never was that guy. It takes your body adjustment to do that. And I'm not shocked that he got hurt. It's the same reason that I talked about with Sean Mania. I know we're not bringing up Sean Mania right now, but he changed his mechanics, changed his arm angle, and then he got hurt. Right, your body needs to adjust to the change when you keep on doing it repetitively. Like, you're going to get injured. If you start working out and you haven't worked out in a long time and you do arms 4 days a week, you're gonna hurt your arms and shoulders. They're gonna be sore, and you might hurt yourself if you do it too much. Same thing in sports. If you change something you've done your whole life or most of the time, and you change it completely, there's a good possibility that your body takes longer to adjust to it, and it might end up causing an oblique injury in Jeff McNeil's case. To me, I don't think it's much of a loss. I don't like seeing anybody getting hurt, especially on my team. I think Jeff McNeil had the job. I think we all believe that, but it gives an opportunity for somebody else, right? I don't think Jeff McNeil is going to hold on to this job if Beatty or Acuna or both are doing their job. I think if we're winning and they're playing well, Jeff McNeil ass is on the bench. I truly believe that. There's no reason why you have to give it up to Jeff McNeil, who's coming back from injury. Sorry, you just got Wally pipped. And if anybody doesn't understand that analogy, we all know what happened with Wally Pipp, right? Got injured, got replaced, and never saw the night of the light again on the field as a starter. That's just how it goes. So, yes, you could lose your job if you're injured, right? Nobody cares about feelings anymore. If somebody else is doing the job better, your ass is on the bench. If you got injured, so be it. One, you're not Juan Soto, you're not Francisco Lindor, you're not Pete Alonso. You are basically a fringe major leaguer at this point who hasn't been good in 3 years now. It's about time somebody else gets an opportunity, and unfortunately, it's because of an injury. But you got to be healthy. You got to be in the lineup to keep your job. And I don't think Jeff McNeil is going to see the light of day. I think either Acuna or Beatty are actually going to show something good enough where I don't think they're going to take him out of the lineup.
Yeah, and Ken is actually took the words out of my mouth talking about the Drew Bledsoe Tom Brady comparison and what you were talking about as well. That's a good one. I was going to say that too. By the way, drop the comments in the live chat, please. We want to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. We want to interact with you. This is a really subjective matter at this point in terms of, not the injury, because again, nobody's rooting for an injury. I thought McNeil was going to be the everyday second baseman starting off the season until the production faltered. But now it's a really subjective case to be made in terms of who's going to be taking his spot for the time being, and whether whoever takes his spot is going to be able to do so in a manner that is going to play themselves into that everyday spot even when he's back. So let's talk about really the only two candidates that should be an option at this point. I mean, listen, with all due respect to Luis De Los Santos and, Donovan Walton, Donnie Walton, I don't want them on this team over either of these two guys. There's no reason to. There's no reason to. I mean, for a multitude of reasons, but there's no reason to, right? I understand I value some of that veteran presence, etc., but you have all the veteran presence you need. These guys need a shot if the opportunity is available, and the opportunity now is available. So this is basically how I'm going to be talking about. And if you disagree, Rob, please let me know. The second base battle should play out. Luis Angel Acuna versus Brett Beatty. Now, I do think that Brett Beatty's spot on this team, whether it's at second base come opening day or whether it's a bench spot, is already solidified. I think that his bat so far, whether you think it's going to be sustainable or not, we've seen Brett Beatty succeed in AAA. We've seen him succeed prior in spring trainings before, and the bat just kind of dwindles as the regular season approaches and hits. And that's fine. The same thing could definitely happen here. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but at this point, if you kind of say that best man is going to win the job, the best man right now is going to be Brett Beatty, according to what we have visually in the box score with the bat. A 379 batting average, couple home runs. I mean, OPS is around 1100. The OPS was actually before today's ball game, but that is the updated batting average. And he struck out 4 times so far compared to Luis Angel Acuna's bat, which has been a little bit more lackluster in terms of the batting average. Not really much power. The OPS is down. And this is a handful of at-bats. We're talking about 29, 30, 31 at-bats right here collectively. So it's not much to work off of, but this is what we have to work off of when we're talking about such a battle. So Jeff McNeil's injured, unfortunately. He's going to be on the shelf for a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks maybe. We'll see how that heals. Who are you giving the nod to? I'm pretty sure you already stated that it's going to be Brett Beatty. To be honest with you, I don't know. I mean, I respect everything that Brett Beatty's been doing so far in spring training, and I think that his roster spot is definitely going to be solidified. But for me, I don't know, man. Come opening day, I think I'd still have to roll with Luis Angel Acuna. That's just that's my subjective thought. That's my subjective thought.
What are they looking for? That's the issue, right? We don't know what they're looking
Exactly.
for. Are they looking for somebody that can play the position, play defensively, and don't care about the bat? If that's the case, why doesn't Luis Angel Acuna have the nod over Beatty from the jump, right? Why was that? Why does Brett Beatty have the nod over Luis Angel Acuna from basically day one? Even though you heard Mendoza say Acuna is going to be a part of this, a big part of this team going forward, it didn't seem like they're really pushing for that much. So I look at it as they probably want to have more offense in this lineup, knowing that the pitching might not be excellent and they might give up some runs. I think they want a bat in the lineup. And if Beatty can make the easy plays and don't make a fool of himself, I think they'll live with it. I truly believe that, because I'm sorry, if you're just going to go based on numbers, and by the way, that's how you determine who wins jobs in spring training. It's based on the numbers you have. I don't want to hear about last year. Last year is irrelevant. It does not matter, right? Because if you were just going by numbers, Luis Angel Acuna should have never been up last year based on minor league numbers. Not saying that he's not going to be a good major league player. I want to make people clear of that. But if there's a battle for a position, you take the player who had a better spring training. It's just that simple. It was stupid to take Brett Beatty last year over Vientos when Vientos had better numbers, right? It just doesn't work. Brett Beatty had the third base job, so I understand that. But at this point, nobody has a job. Somebody's got to win it. And now it's not even close, to be quite honest with you. Luis Angel Acuna has shown no power. He's batting 231. And I'm not saying Brett Beatty's going to bat 379, but there's potential there. And I know Acuna has the potential as well, but you can't be a 528 OPS hitter. You have 4 strikeouts just like Brett Beatty. It's just not close at all. And Acuna is probably going to be the better overall baseball player, major leaguer. But as of right now, if you give it to Acuna, you're telling everybody else in your organization, it doesn't matter what you do. It's who we want and who we like. You can't do that. I'm sorry. You just can't. Because I don't like that concept. They tried that too many times throughout the last couple of seasons, not just with David Stearns, but with Billy Epler, with Sandy Olson. It was the same shit. Give it to the guy, the player, who performed better than the other player. It's just that simple. Because how does that make anybody feel? Brett Beatty has done everything he possibly can to make this team, or to be the starter, or he was going to make the team, as we know, just based on his performance, probably was going to be that last bench guy on the bench. But now that the starting position is available, How can you give it to Acuna? Why? Because the potential could be there? It's not fair. You're telling Brett Beatty you can do whatever you want to do numbers wise, but because Acuna is more of the quote unquote better prospect now, we're going to give Acuna the position when he does not deserve it. And you can go back to last year and talk about the games that he played. Fine. But still, you still got to win a job, right? Luisano Acuna and Brett Beatty had an opportunity to make this roster. We all felt like Beatty had the nod over Luisano Acuna. It is what it is. Brett Beatty gets the chance until he loses the job. It's just that simple. Luisano Acuna will get an opportunity if Brett Beatty fails. But what if Brett Beatty's good? Are you going to be bitching and moaning about Luisano Acuna? Absolutely not. That's the thing, right? If Brett Beatty is playing well, not one person will talk about Luisano Acuna like they're talking about him in the chat right now. Most people in the chat want Luisano Acuna. Why? Because of what, 10 games last year? 15 games last
14,
year?
14.
14 games last year? He performed very well. But you can't go on 14 games. Last since Millage played 14 games, how did he feel? How did he look? Look at those numbers. Do you wanted him in the outfield after 60 games? Probably not. Not saying Luisano Acuna is not going to be a good player, but there's no need to rush Luisano Acuna if he's still working on things. Why put him into the mix when you don't have to right now? I'm sorry, he's had a bad spring. It hasn't been good. We know he's a good defensive fielder. We know that. But if the Mets are just looking for defense, then yeah, of course it's going to be Luisano Acuna as a starter. But I hardly doubt that because most teams, if not all teams, want the better hitter. And the better hitter is going to get the chance before the better defender. Luisano Acuna hasn't hit well in spring. Too bad. Maybe he should have tried harder. Maybe he should have worked on things. I don't know. But, you can't be, and I said this yesterday, I feel like he's a little lackadaisical. I feel like that he gets a bit lazy. I truly feel that. I feel like if he doesn't get his way or he doesn't get what he probably wants, and I think that's a big reason why his AAA numbers were down, because he believes he probably doesn't belong there. Maybe he doesn't. But you also have to show it too. You got to give the organization a reason to put you on the major league roster. Don't just assume they're going to put you on the roster because your name is Luis Anel Acuna. All right? It doesn't work like that.
Listen, I agree with you in terms of the precedent that would be set given the disparity between these numbers right here. I've already stated that subjectively, I think Luisangel Acuna is the guy that I would roll with come opening day. I can't back that up with numbers because again, Brett Beatty's just playing, lights out right now in terms of the bat. And I see D here. I like this. I'm making a list of Beatty doubters. Honestly, D, I'm not going to lie to you. You can put me on that list because I don't know that this version of Brett Beatty is going to be the version of Brett Beatty that we're going to see if he gets handed that opening day job, because we've already seen Brett Beatty in really low pressure situations to start the season, and he's produced nothing. And I hope that some sort of philosophy, some sort of mechanical adjustment was made in his swing, that he's able to get a little bit more lift on the ball and stop the ground ball rate.
That's what he needs to do.
That. Yeah, and we've seen that so far in spring training. That's awesome, right? I'm not even going to say that it's a lack of competition because I don't want to be unfair to him, because everybody's been really seeing, similar sorts of competition here in spring training, as not everybody's best is going to be going naturally. I just look at Luisangel Acuna and I'm like, I think this guy's going to be all right. I think this guy's going to be good, man. And I understand that there's a little bit of concerns in terms of the stature, what is he, 5'8", something like that. A lot of people look at smaller baseball players and they're like, oh, their bat's not going to do anything at this level. And that could be valid at times, but I don't know, man. Something that he showed me, even in 14 games last season, I understand that 14 games shouldn't hold that much weight. I do get that. I 100% understand that. But I saw a fire in him that I don't really see
Agree.
than many major leaguers. Especially when they come up in such high pressure situations. I didn't, I saw something different in Luis Angel Acuna. He sees that opportunity and he was not ready to relinquish it at all. Until Francisco Lindor came back. And at that point, you have to, because that's Francisco Lindor operating at an MVP caliber level at that point. Listen, he's the natural second baseman. When you're talking about defensively, double plays, etc., and the efficiency with Lindor up the middle, it's going to be Luis Angel Acuna that gets the nod. Offensively, yes, 100%. Brett Baty has been outworking Luis Angel Acuna at this point, and I do agree, Rob. This is where I can understand and see your point in terms of Brett Baty getting that opening day nod, because the precedent that it sets if
Correct.
he doesn't, given the numbers, discrepancy, would be a bad look. But we've seen it happen before. Like you mentioned. So I'm really curious to see how this actually plays out. I think Luis Angel Acuna is going to be good. And I'm not saying just because of the name. Yes, everybody knows Ronald Acuna Jr. Everybody knows who his brother is. Everybody knows the name. I understand that. But I watched Luis Angel Acuna closely when he came up in huge pressure situations. We're talking about in division games with the Mets competing for a playoff spot against the Phillies, against whoever else, and he showed up. And not only that, the one thing that everybody thinks that he's going to lack at the major league level showed up as well. And that was the power with the home run ball and just really the extra base hits. So I hate to make the judgment based off of last season, but I really think that opened up the eyes of the Mets front office. And for better or for worse, whether we agree with it or not, I kind of do think that what he did last season down the stretch, it's not like, oh, wipe it off. It's a clean slate in spring training. Best man wins. I think what he did in the latter stages of last season carries over and carries some weight in this decision as well. Personally speaking.
Take our opinions out of it. If what you said is true, is legit, why aren't the Mets pushing more for Luis Angel Acuna while they have been pushing more of Brett Baty in our faces? It's just that simple, right? They're telling us otherwise, right? They don't see the 14 games last year as something that is more important than what's going on right now. Because they talked about Acuna is going to be a part of this roster, big part of this roster. Mendoza said it, but what they have been showing us in spring is exactly the opposite. So again, they don't care about them 14 games. It's nice to see. They just,
but they need to. They need
sure.
to put Baty out there. No, I'm not saying about Luis Acuna. They need to put Baty out there because this is his last chance,
Is
Rob.
it just
This
about
isn't
his
a.
last chance? Because look,
I think it is.
if you're trying to win, we can all have an argument for Luis Angel Acuna because of the talent he has, what he showed in 2 weeks of games. But Brett Baty performed right now in a spot where if he didn't perform, he probably wouldn't even be on the opening day roster, even as a bench guy. So that's where, again, we're going to find out really soon. That's why I can't wait until the final roster is put up there, because it's going to be very interesting. What are they looking for? Do they even care about the numbers? We don't know. We have no idea, right? We don't know. We know Brett Baty has put up ungodly numbers in the minors.
Well, we've seen it before.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But again, you can't bat 231 in spring training as a prospect who doesn't have a starting job and should be given the position. I'm sorry, you can't get the starting job. I'm sorry. It just doesn't make sense. It's not like the Mets had a hole and they've been waiting for Luis Angel Acuna to take that spot. And they say, all right, we have a hole now. It's yours. That is not the case. That is not the case. I'm not saying Brett Baty is better than Luis Angel Acuna. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm sick and tired of too many guys getting the opportunity where they have not deserved it. Luis Angel Acuna has not performed right now, right? I don't care about those 14 games. It might matter to some, but it clearly doesn't matter to the Mets. It doesn't. Because if it did, Luis Angel Acuna would have been on this roster. There would have been no doubt about it. He would have been on the bench. Here's what I'm thinking, and I truly believe this. They don't believe Luis Angel Acuna can sit on the bench on the roster and play sporadically. Now, maybe this opening, provides them with a different mindset and saying, well, Luis Acuna can get a hell of a lot of at-bats as a starter second baseman. Maybe that's the mindset at this point. But again, you're setting a precedent. You don't have to do good in spring training and somebody can have better numbers who's fighting for the same position and you don't get the job. We can talk about fair all you want, but what is Brett Beatty supposed to do? Should he go 0 for 20 to his next 20 at-bats and say, well, I suck just like him. Maybe I should get the job now. So there's a precedent there as well. You can't suck in spring training and just automatically get the job. But again, we're not talking about a bench spot anymore. I think both of these guys should make the roster at this point now. Is it possible, if I'm not mistaken? Because McNeil's going on the IL. So does that add an extra spot on the roster where both of these guys can make it? And if both of these guys make it, Acuna should be the second baseman and Beatty should be on the bench, because I think Acuna will thrive with more at bats. I don't think you can sit Acuna and play him sporadically. Yes, Stan, I understand Beatty made an error today. Guess who also made an error in their lifetime? Francisco Lindor, right? Pete Alonso, Vientos, Bader, Tyrone Taylor, they all make errors. It's baseball. But again, he made an error today. So what are we supposed to banish him and send him and tell him to go play Little League Baseball? No. Of course not. Baseball players make errors. His position is not second base. Completely understand that. And I hope you played baseball, Stan, that you understand that if you've been a third baseman all your life, you are trained, you practice to get in front of almost every ball as a third baseman. You try to square up the ball, get in front of it as a third baseman. That's what he was trying to do at second base going to his right. Not the first ball that he was way up the middle and probably had to make a leaping throw to get the guy or even try to get the guy. It was the other one where it bounced off his side. He tried to get in front of the ball. That's a third base instinct. That's something that he has to get over, because it's not, you have to backhand that ball. He has to get over that aspect. Remember, when you're playing third base, right, more often than not, you don't go to your right more often. You go to your left more often between to third and short base hole. So he's more comfortable probably going to his left than his right, specifically as a third baseman. You are trained to get in front of the ball as a third baseman. You're trained to get the ball in front of you, so if it takes a bad hop, it hits you in the chest, and you can pick it back up and make a play. That's what he was trying to do. He has that third base mindset still. That is not easy to just forget, right? Baseball instincts take over. He's got to learn to backhand those balls. Maybe he will. Not saying he will, right? If I'm not mistaken, when he got moved to second base, you want to talk about minor league numbers? You want to talk about what somebody did last year? He played better defensively at second base in the minors than he did at third base. He had more errors at third base than he did at second base. So what does that tell you? Does that mean he could play second? I don't know. But this isn't a job where you put him at second base, give him the starting job, and say, all right, it's yours until Jeff Mcneil comes back or not. No, if he sucks, Luis Acuna will be up here quicker than we can say go. It's just that simple.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest question I will say is, how are the Mets? Because I think both of these guys are going to be on the roster. I mean, there's no way that you cannot roster both of these guys and choose to go with a guy like Donovan Walton. Again, no disrespect to him and what he's been doing this spring training, but over these two young guys, especially in Brett Beatty. I mean, listen, Brett Beatty, this is his last chance to prove that he belongs in this organization, right? Long term. So I think both of these guys are going to get the shot. I think what we're debating here and what we've been debating for the past 10 minutes is who's going to be the starter. I really do think that it's going to be a platoon type basis in terms of lefty righty, as much as we don't like it, right? I mean, there's a lefty on the mound for Houston, as we mentioned in the post game yesterday, that is going to be appearing in game one. Are they going to bat Brett Beatty versus the lefty, or are they going to give the nod to Luis Angel Acuna?
That's
you know what I mean?
Take a platoon.
Like they could platoon, and that's what I'm saying.
I'm fine with that, even though we don't agree with the platoon.
But do you understand? So that's what I'm saying. So if they platoon, which I don't like, it's not going to give either of these guys on the screen a real legit opportunity to play themselves into that position because they're not going to get enough reps by the time McNeil gets back. So then when McNeil gets back, that's going to be his position. So that's what I'm saying. Like, platoon has its advantages and disadvantages.
Agree.
You know what I'm saying? And if you are a McNeil believer and if you want him to be that everyday second baseman, then you're probably hoping for the platoon to not give one of these young guys the full opportunity to win that job. But if you are a believer in either Acuna or Beatty and them trying to win this job every day and take that away from McNeil, who has looked less than impressive for a long time now, then you don't want the platoon. And this is the debate that we should be having, rather than who is going to get the job. It's whether it's going to be a platoon or not, because we could very well see both of these guys at second base on an off and on basis for the first month and a half. So that's really what I'm curious about, what they do. And knowing the Mets and knowing MLB teams in general, I think that they're going to platoon, especially if they were going to platoon veteran guys at the DH spot, right? And Winker and Marte with a fully healthy Nimmo. There's no question in my mind that they're going to platoon these young guys. There's no question in my mind. So again, opening day roster part 2 outlook here, 26-man roster projection. That looks different than the one that we just had just yesterday because we have another injury on the books here for the New York Mets. For me, I know you would make it different. This is what I put. I put Luisangel Acuna down there in that starting lineup. Brett Beatty could be in that starting lineup just as easily. Again, we're talking about lefty versus righty, but I think we can both agree that the bottom of the lineup, past Jesse Winker, looks vastly different than it did before, missing Francisco Alvarez and missing Jeff McNeil. But I hope that I don't offend anybody in this fan base to say that, honestly, the replacements for both of these positions in Terens, Acuna, and Beatty in replace of Alvarez and McNeil, I think Alvarez is going to come back and do a fine job. I really do. And that's going to be his position when he does come back. That's not a question as much as it is with Jeff McNeil. But I do think that at this point, when we're talking about April and maybe mid-May, the replacements that the Mets have right now in the bottom of the order, I think that they can keep this team afloat with the same production level, maybe slightly less than what you would get with the slated opening day starters at second base in McNeil and catching in Francisco Alvarez. In other words, I don't really think it's that huge of a deal, unfortunately, especially with the seasons that we saw last year from Alvarez and McNeil. Now, if I had to choose anybody to have a bounce back type of season, more so than what he, and what he posted in 2023, it'd be Francisco Alvarez, no question, right? Over a guy like Jeff McNeil. But I think that right now, with the cards that the Mets have been dealt with, unfortunately, with this injury bug, and I really do hope that this injury bug is a sign that they're getting it out of the way early, right, rather than later, because it can pop up later too. I mean, we just don't know. I think that the lineup is still going to be fine, and I think that if the top of the lineup has to, at the end of the day, carry the lineup, they will. But I even think Luis Terens, we've seen his bat succeed in spring training so far. I think Luisangel Acuna's bat's going to be fine. Hopefully, we see some progression with Brett Beatty come regular season than we've seen in the past couple of seasons. And from there on, I mean, we're just hoping for as much runs as possible. So what do you think about this updated outlook here, Rob?
The backups are a hell of a lot better than what we had, right? Of the Tomas Nidos of the world, the Omar Narvaez of the world, the DJ Stewarts of the world. It's a lot better. Hell of a lot better. So you could do a lot worse. I don't think we're losing much from Luis Terens. I already said that yesterday. I like it a lot. Luisangel Acuna, again, I'm not going to fight over this. I think if Brett Beatty and Acuna make the team, you got to start Luisangel Acuna. I think Luisangel Acuna needs to get at-bats. He has to. I think to succeed, he needs to have at-bats. I don't think Acuna will thrive off the bench. I think Brett Beatty can possibly do that. I'm not saying he could. I think the mindset could be a little bit better for Beatty on the bench. I think he can provide offense off the bench. So let's just put it that way. I think Luisangel Acuna is the type of guy that needs to start. I think he can drift off into oblivion if he's on the bench for a couple of games in a row and just say, hey, Luis, go ahead, go out there and play. He needs to start every day. I don't know if Beatty's going to be a big leaguer or not, but if you got to put both of them guys on the roster, Acuna needs to start over Brett Beatty just based on what I said.
Yeah, and I see some people talking about Sean Manaea. He did get cleared to throw, which is really good news. The MRI came back clean. That is awesome news,
Awesome.
honestly, in terms of getting him back. But I still think that he's probably not going to be ready, to start the season, to be
Yeah,
honest with you. I
yeah.
think they're going to take it slow with him.
Now, instead of missing 3 or 4 starts or 5, he might only miss 2, which is a great
True.
sign because, if you really think about it, 3 or 4 starts to stretch out, warm up, get ready and stretch out your arm a little bit. They'll probably still take it slow, maybe miss 3 starts, but I think you might see him at the end of April. And now that's great because we haven't heard nothing, right? It's been almost 2 weeks since we heard about Sean Manaea, so it's a great sign. We're going to need him back, obviously, but you shouldn't rush him because you don't need him to aggravate something or hurt something again. So I would take your time, even if he's still got to miss the month of April. I think we'll be okay. But it's nice to see him start throwing again.
Fantastic news in terms of Sean Manaea. Not so great news as it pertains to Jeff McNeil. And if you think that this is the last time that you saw this graphic on the left-handed side of both of our faces, then let's hope you're right. Because I don't want to have to remake this come opening day talking about another injury. If anything, somebody should be fast tracking in terms of being back, and then we can put Sean Manaea's name back in there. But I just don't think it's going to happen. So hopefully this graphic is as follows, with Daniel Nunez being on the roster, Brandon Nimmo, same thing, and we'll see about the backup catcher in terms of Hayden Singer, Jackson Reitz, Chris Williams, etc. But this is what the Mets are working with. I mean, that's 4 starters across the board, right? Am I missing anybody in terms of the 4 starters? I mean, that's McNeil, Alvarez, Montas, Manaea. Am I forgetting somebody, Rob?
That's it, I think.
Yeah, so 2 of your 9, right? 2 of 9 in the lineup and 2 of 5 or 6 in the rotation. It's a pretty big hit that the Mets are taking here early in spring training. So we'll see how they deal with the adversity when March 27th rolls around. But this has been the New York Mets post-game show. Rob, I'll leave you with the final thoughts here before we close things out.
Jeff McNeil, that came out of nowhere with the oblique. Great news. Look, we got bad news and good news today with Sean Manaea and Jeff McNeil. Again, we can have our opinions and our, back and forth on who you want to see at second base. If both of these guys are going to make the roster, we said our opinions. Acuna should start just based on I think he needs more at bats. But I'm not sure if they're completely sold yet on Luis Acuna. It just feels like they want to start him in the minors for whatever reason they're given, or they have the process because they clearly don't care about last year. It's nice to reminisce about, but I don't think they cared that much of 14 games, even though it was damn good. Brett Beatty seems like he's going to get his chance, and he's performed well, so he should. He's outperformed Acuna in spring. I know nobody cares about spring numbers, but when you're fighting for a position, you got to show up in spring training and show some life, show that you have something to prove that you belong on the roster. Not saying that Brett Beatty is going to last or be a big leaguer. We don't know that. Please, everybody, stay healthy. It seems like every freaking day we're hearing something. I keep on knocking on damn wood to with all this these injuries. We got 14 days until opening day, 13 days until I'm in Houston. Please, no more freaking injuries. Everybody stay healthy. Take him out of the lineup. Let him sit in the beach. Just keep him healthy, please. Thank you.
Yeah. And I agree with that sentiment as well. And we'll see how the last couple of roster spots for the New York Mets in terms of the backup catcher and the second base role shake out. Not everybody's going to agree, and that's okay. And that's just the gravity of when the Mets have to deal with injuries, is how we have to talk about it. So we appreciate you all tuning in. I'm not sure if I'll be available for the post game tomorrow night because I believe it's Mets versus Cardinals at 6:10 p.m. So the post game would be around 8:39. We'll see. It's a game time decision. But again, continue to just smash the notifications buttons And you will be notified when we're live or posting videos, both on my channel and Rob's channel. Smash the thumbs up on both of our streams. Subscribe to both of our channels. We will be coming at you all with post games, pre games, everything else in between on both of our channels. You will not miss a beat if you subscribe to both of our channels. I promise you, one of us will keep you in the loop. But the New York Mets lose and drop today's game by a score of 3-2 to the Boston Red Sox. David Peterson was on the mound. A couple of runs being scratched across home plate by the Mets later in the ball game, but they do drop the game 3-2. We'll see you all for the next post-game stream. As always, let's go Mets. And as Rob said, stay healthy. Peace.
Let's go Mets.